So, I mean, I guess for anyone that would watch this that doesn't know for some reason, who are you?
Oh yeah. So I'm the Zek, original professional back in the old days for Onslaught and a few other teams that I played with, and now uh, went and started Duel with kind of Wooly as from the coaching perspective. So did that for a good chunk of time, and then after about like 8 months or so, 6 to 8 months, we got signed with NRG. So I was the coach and ultimately became coach and manager for NRG. And then after that, the team kind of disbanded and everything, and I've kind of just been doing some advising. So that's a little bit about me.
For sure. So, how did you actually get into coaching? Because it's actually pretty rare to find many coaches in the PUBG scene, especially people that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, the biggest part for me was like I think most people always kind of want to start out being a professional. They want to be the best at whatever game they're going to be playing, and if you're driven by that, awesome. Like definitely go for it if you have the time. And that for me, I didn't have the time. The reason why I kind of like step back like right now, and have kind of just done advising is really just because of time. I have a job that I really love, like outside of work, that kind of pays the bills and everything. And this has always been kind of a hobby that I've tried to take it to the max. So really came down to kind of just saying, hey, I don't have the time to do this, but I can be a really good coach. And I think I kind of established that and kind of the changing the track record of the team and bringing them where they got to and plateaued at. So that's kind of where I made the decision, was really from a time commitment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm relatively similar too, because when I kind of made the decision to go into coaching, it was from a perspective of thinking I was really good at like the strategy and figuring out how to play the game, but not having
Mhm.
very good mechanics and not really having the drive to really put in the time to like make sure my mechanics were like up to par with everyone else, you know?
Yeah, and that was one of the things I recognized. I definitely found my overall positioning strategy to the game. When I was playing back in like IEM Oakland time, so back in the Stone Age when this
Oh wow,
game was
yeah.
really getting off the ground, I made a team basically 2 weeks, or if that, it was probably a week before. Threw together three other guys. One of them, Rift, is at GLL right now. And then the other two kind of kind of shifted off the scene and everything, but really IGL the team to the finals of the qualifiers for North America, and it went well, but some of the situations I was losing was kind of mechanically driven, as you were saying,
Right.
where I definitely tried to work on it and improved, but there was nowhere near kind of where the professionals are. So I kind of was like, well, let's take what I can do and actually know how to do, and focus on the strategy aspect, and kind of improving everybody's thoughts towards actually approaching the game.
Yeah, for sure. So you probably started doing coaching way before I did, and I know you were definitely in the
Hmm.
competitive scene before I was. So like back in like 2017, what did you like think were the major issues with most teams or with the people that you were working with in terms of strategy? Because obviously the meta
Yeah,
and everything has evolved so much, even just in the short time between when you started and when I started.
exactly. The biggest thing that was happening was there were so many teams that were actually kind of just dive bombing middle and then playing around luck based. And kind of the first initiative that we took, we kind of we weren't really the patents of it, but we found out what our team did well, and what our team. I think we were one of the first teams to kind of start edge stratting a little bit, and essentially that evolved. But really, what it came down to was heavy information play style. When you saw early on in the games, kind of around like even third person, whatever, people were just dive bombing middle and kind of sitting there, and then they would dive bomb middle again next zone. And really, what it came down to was that was just a dumb play, because you were often losing one or two people, and it wasn't kind of the end game, which is most important. Having four up just gives you so much opportunity, that I made the call to say, hey, we're gonna play a little bit slower play style that is probably going to be more edge, but it's going to be heavy information based, and we're going to move off of that information. So it kind of shifted to that perspective, which is really kind of taken off. You see a lot of the teams that perform well, they have a deep knowledge of the map, and where to scout from certain locations and how to move, is really what it kind of came down to.
For sure, for sure. How do you think, as the months kind of went on with NRG, or I guess Duel, how do you think
Yeah.
like you really shifted their focus as the months went on, as you like learned more about the meta and like everyone kind of got better? Like, where do you see yourself kind of like improving for the most part?
Yeah, so initially it was obviously a little rocky off the beginning. It improved a little bit. We had people who knew how to shoot. We had really talented aim players. So the team that ended up becoming NRG, just to give you some insight, Wooly was the in-game leader.
Yeah.
And then everybody else was kind of heavy fragging potential. So we had Pentalol, and then K-Mine, who's now on C9, and then Znark. So really, kind of everybody originated from a source that was heavy in terms of aim mechanics, because that was one thing Wooly's like, I don't have this. I maybe not be the best aimer, but I can usually get them in the best position to kind of take advantage of that. So we did a lot, kind of centric around that initially, and saying, hey, we're going to work into this information style, and it's not going to go good right away because we aren't comfortable playing that way, but we're going to kind of eliminate some of the problems that we're having by doing this center always strat, which doesn't really make sense all of the time, and just go ahead and progress and say, hey, for like 2 weeks, all we're going to focus on is we're going to play on foot and get into team fights and focus on our team fighting in scrims or something like that, where we do kind of those specifics to just kind of gear certain aspects to the actual gameplay style, and then other weeks would be focused on scouting and doing things like that. So kind of coming up with like a small thing you want your team to work on for an extended period of time, and then talk about what worked well. Was kind of the benefit of doing that initially and trying of transitioning into that information play style.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess kind of switching topics just slightly. With NRG, how did you like get connected with Duel, and then uh, yeah, I mean, really, just how did that start up? Because I don't know if you were like the first person coaching. I'm trying to remember if Miniman was coaching before you were. And
He may have been.
but like when
I
you guys were kind
imagine.
of starting, I feel like it was sort of uncharted territory to have actual coaches in the scene.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't common. Was a big thing. A lot of people didn't see the benefit to it. And really, I came at it with a different approach. Like, the majority of what I was doing was keeping the team stable. If you've ever been with a team of 4 people, you know that you can be at each other's throats and kind of have disagreements on stuff, and I would come in from a neutral perspective and kind of just offer my insight. Like, they trusted me, obviously, because I'd played the game and had knowledge of the game, and I've hopped in there with them a few times before, and they're like, oh my god, you actually know what you're doing from the player perspective, why don't you play? And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's a different story, and kind
Yeah.
of commitment behind that. So there was trust in that aspect to kind of be able to lead them from like the sidelines and say, hey guys, this is kind of what we need to do, and we need to execute on it, and results will come, and they did. Like, we did pretty consistently well across Awesome, PUBG Online, a whole bunch of different leagues, and we're getting top 5 placements for like the earliest part of that. And obviously it didn't translate to LAN as much. We kind of dropped the ball on a lot of that stuff, but that was due to other issues. But it definitely led to success of just being a neutral person, to give insight to the team and kind of just give them guidance and kind of de-escalate any situation that kind of came around.
Kind of a funny story about like jumping into the game to like fill in when someone's gone is when we were practicing for the lead up to PGISA when I was on Team Secret. 17 was gone for a couple days, so I had to fill in for IGL. And the first game that we did, we actually won while I was IGLing, and the like only kill I got was when I team killed someone. And but for a while, I had 100% win rate in competitive. So
Yeah, I vividly remember hopping into scrims with another team and being the last one alive, and doing really well from a positioning standpoint, and kind of working my way and snaking my way throughout the rest of the map, and then I missed a full clip. So
yep, yep,
on a guy in front of that, and I'm like, oh well, this is why I'm a manager and a coach.
exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's always reinvigorating to come back in and hop into that because it's what I like. I like the competitive aspect of it. It's just don't have the time, and
For sure.
it drives me and drives me nuts when I can't do that. So
Yeah, I love the strategy aspect of this game, especially because I feel like when you really like make a correct rotation and you get in that right spot and it works out, you feel like you really outsmarted everyone and you really
yeah.
use your tools better than everyone else. I love that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely there's it's a different and one thing everybody from the viewer to the player are figuring out is this game is playing a lot differently than all of esports that you've seen before because it's not just a team v team kind of perspective. It's a team v holy crap. We have 5 other teams in here who are just as good as us, or in some cases better, at certain situations that we have to deal with. And like you said, that making that perfect rotate where you kind of just you get everybody in there and you're in a perfect spot, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, why didn't we do that?"
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you're just fighting them off and destroying everybody. That's like what every team kind of strives for.
For sure. I mean, that's what keeps everyone going, right? Is getting that one perfect rotation to get that one perfect game.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said something earlier about how back in when you started coaching, most people didn't see the need for a coach. And I feel like that even continues to today, mostly in NA, because people I've talked to
Yeah,
from every other region, for the most part, seem to believe in coaches wholeheartedly. But I've talked to quite a few
yeah,
teams from NA, and a lot of them don't see the benefit to having a coach. Uh,
yeah.
so, what are your
It,
thoughts on that?
I think they're out of their mind to
Yeah.
think that they don't need a coach. I think they might be able to understand the game, and that's the issue right now. Is there hasn't been anybody who's kind of like stepped back from the game like I did and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this." There are other individuals like Marin from FlyQuest who have
Yep.
kind of stuck around from coaching from the beginning. Like he knew how to play and didn't play scrims or anything that much. But he's done stuff in the past where everything is kind of translated, and they don't see the direct benefit. They're like, oh, someone to talk strategy or whatever, and there's that aspect to it. But if you have like for me specifically, I was more of like the team dad. If anything was really going wrong, they could talk to me, and that was like the manager side of it, which is kind of completely different, where I could get anything done that you needed for me to get done, which is a huge relief for players. Like I remember handling all of K-Mine's like missed bag stuff when we were in Austin for DreamHack,
Hmm.
and it took a whole bunch of stress off his shoulders because I'm like, I'll handle it. Just give me your phone. We'll figure it out from here. I can't speak French like with Montreal, but I'll be able to like talk to someone on the phone and get your
Right.
bag here. And people often overlook that aspect of kind of removing things, either from like the strategy perspective or some different things or prep time and breaking down VODs, and really it's just a relief from the players in terms of like their time commitment because they're more focused on actually playing the game and then reviewing the feedback as opposed to having to sit through like 4 hours of VODs and pull out the important parts and do some of that stuff. So it's overlooked from like the amount of work that is actually removed.
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the things that people don't really understand is just how much time having a coach, a strategy coach specifically, can like actually save a team when coming up with
Yeah.
different strategies and like figuring out what's going wrong. Because a coach, like their job is to like actually look through like every game you play and like figure
Yeah.
out the patterns that you're doing, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, what everyone else is doing. Whereas if you're a player, then you're in the game the whole time, and it's hard for you to remove yourself from being in the game and then go back and
Yeah.
watch that VOD and look at it objectively from an outside perspective and say, this is maybe what we should be doing. And it just takes a lot longer too.
Yeah, exactly, and that basically hits it right on the head. Is I think it's like so some people are perfectly fine for the time commitment, and they'll spend 16 hours a day where they'll play and then they'll focus on some mechanics. So like 6 to 8 hours dedicated to scrims with the warm up and then stuff afterwards, and then they'll do the review and then they'll kind of make some changes off of that where they're kind of committed to that. But there's the aspect of being really neutral with some of that, and being able to say, even though it went bad this time, it wasn't really that bad of an overall play.
For sure.
Because you weren't actually involved in that situation. You can take a look and step back and actually be able to explain why. And if you have a good team, and this is where it's kind of can be like conflicting with some teams, is and why they don't want to have a coach is because they're kind of going against a lot of the times what your actual like instinctual thing was, or kind of your thoughts behind the situation. So they're challenging you to kind of rechange your thinking structure in a lot of cases of how you go about different situations to improve. And a lot of players, like, they can have issues with that. Like it's not something that they like someone else telling them they're doing these things bad, you need to fix them. Where as a coach, it should go beyond that and say you need to fix it by practicing these 3 things, and let me know what your thoughts are on that. So that's where I feel like NA is struggling, is they don't treat it more as a job perspective where there is going to be negative feedback that comes your way, but it's up to you to take that and turn it into things you actually need to work on.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I think the thing that makes it worse too is you can look at some of the NA teams that have a lot of top talent on them, but like chronically underperform by making the same mistakes every tournament. And sometimes I just look at it and I'm like, I could fix this in a day, but I can't. I don't know if you ever get that too.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
I'll
no,
look at something like C9, who has been, having problems for months now, and sometimes
their
they just make the
their
same
new
mistakes
roster
over and
though is
over
going to do
again.
really well.
Oh, I 100% agree. But I mean, you
Yeah.
look at when their old roster was making the same mistakes just
Yeah.
constantly, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so easy to fix, but they don't want to coach. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we ran into the same mistakes, but it was more of mistakes that were happening on LAN, of like individual attitude and some of that stuff, which is key. Like
Right.
when you're in a large series games, it's like similar to golf. Excuse me, where it's very much like keeping in a mental state where regardless what happens, you can say, well, I did the X, Y, and Z good on like this hole, where you like playing it back in your head and said, I could have done this a little bit better. Like, even if something like you went and did like a hole in one in particular case, like I could have done this better. This didn't feel like right. The same aspects apply to this game where you have to be able to take a look back at positive or negative in the middle of a series that's happening over the course of multiple days, and be able to say, I need to do this, this, and this, and then reset for the next game. And that was one of the struggles that I feel like a lot of teams, specifically in NA, have, is because they aren't like machines when they actually approach it. I think they're a little too emotional, and need to remove that, which is like, it's fine. It's the one thing that you can see with FaZe in them, is they try and put that aside and just focus on performing and knowing what they'll do is going to work.
Right. Have you ever, like, since you brought up golf, do you play it at all or no?
I wouldn't call play it. I would call moving my ball around the course and doing that. But I get out like once or twice a summer, when the weather's nice, and go hang out with either family or friends and move the ball around the course and have a few drinks and hang out. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I was just wondering because when I was a kid, I like wanted to become a professional golfer, and I was actually pretty good. So
okay.
yeah, when you brought
Yeah,
up
no,
golf, I was just like, wait, he plays golf too? So
No. My big things right now are like rock climbing, which is like small individual problems. I do a bunch of cycling, so that's more of like putting yourself in the hurt zone and kind of pushing yourself beyond like what you think is your physical limits. And kind of just focusing mentally to get past like a physical barrier where your body's kind of telling you no.
right.
And then like I did rowing in college, which is very much the same thing, just shorter distance of your whole body screaming you and telling you to stop, and you're kind
Yeah.
of just keep going.
Nah, that shit's hard.
It was not easy by any means. It was I was in college full time, working a job part time, and rowing on top of that 20 hours a week.
Damn.
Yeah, yeah. My body and mind kind of shut down.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's that's like one of the things like coaching that I was starting to do, and it actually worked out with K-Mine. Is we did a small test on some stuff of he's like, hey, go ahead and make me a schedule. I'm like, okay, what do you want out of this schedule? He's like, well, I want to perform for scrims and then make sure I stop and get up enough early enough before actually coming into scrims, because he was having the issue, and I told him this of like earlier on of like, hey, you're showing up 20 minutes before scrim starts and you just woken up, like you're spending your
Hmm.
time to actually wake up before you're actually supposed to perform. And this was even happening um, in some of the actual like PUBG Online earlier on. This was still like Duel era. So of actually implementing a schedule where you're actually breaking it down. You're saying you're up 2 hours before this. You need to get a meal in, try and move around the house or whatever, get some chores done. Hop on at this particular time, like over 30 minutes before, and start your warm up, and then actually get in. And he's like, the performance boost that he saw in terms of consistency and some of that was just so great after that. And then he was still able after scrims to do his normal streaming schedule, because that's just a huge part of what works for him mentally.
Yep.
And kind of accompanying all of those things, which is like I pulled some of this off of like my experience from like sports and rowing of like what makes me perform well, as kind of just like research into like different professional sports and how they actually approach like their day to day for like a long like mentally draining session.
Yeah, and I think it's like an aspect of coaching that's really often overlooked as well is just the fact that you can have a team leader that's able to give people direction from an
Mm-hmm.
unbiased point of view and just say this is what the best thing would be for you and the team, and I think that this is the direction we should go, and then they can take it as like real constructive criticism instead of like as an insult like, "Oh, you're not practicing as much as I am, you're so useless," stuff like that. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's ultimately like some level of baseline you have to maintain, but there's the big thing is really juggling like actually putting the time in as well as maintaining that mental like performance. So one of the things that I often did that was different than what a lot of teams are like play 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 play, and I'm like, no, you need to like have some focus blocks, and then have like I was strictly on have a day off every day,
Yeah.
every week. And even from like a day perspective, have some time where if we were going to like post scrims, like 6 hours of intense work of is what it should be. Oftentimes it wasn't the case just because of how focused was and everything, and that's like one of the problems kind of with it. But they need to have some time to recoup and regather themselves before they go into another block of focusing on like, okay, what happened, and very much focusing on also the recovery aspect, because it's huge in kind of athletics of how you actually recover is how you're actually going to perform in the next series or event or whatever you're kind of working on. And I feel like
Hmm.
that's kind of lacking in esports, and it's developing. You can see like Fnatic and a whole bunch of other professional teams, whether it's League of Legends or CS:GO, kind of bringing in like a nutritionist as well as some other stuff where
Right.
they're trying to get the edge in those other areas, so that way that they're gonna be performing at the top level.
I had a very similar philosophy when I was coaching Secret, where it was actually a bit difficult because all four people on the team had very drastically different personal schedules in terms of how much they like
Yeah,
to practice and all of that. Like for example, Smitty and Fiend, for example, were just absolute workaholics. Like I could not get them to stop playing PUBG because they
yeah,
were just into it all the time. They really wanted to be the best constantly, and they thought that like hard work every single day for hours a day was the way to do that. And like I can definitely see why because they were both fantastically talented players. But at the same time, I'm like, guys, you need to take a break. We've been playing for like hours and hours every
yeah.
day, right? I'm like, go spend some time with your girlfriend, man. Like, come on. But then you had other guys like 17, for example, who very much treats it like it's his job and he treats it like he's there for the amount of time, but he doesn't really like want to be always playing the game all the time, right?
Yeah,
Which also works very well. But sometimes it's hard to get everyone on the same page with how they should be like treating the game as a team. and when everyone needs to be there at the same time and stuff like that. So what I did
Yeah.
is I had everyone play war mode for like an hour before, scrims, that everyone was warmed up, and there were no excuses like, I'm not warmed up, sorry, I missed that shot, because
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
excuses
I
like that are what
mean,
really ruins practice for me, is when people are like saying, oh, that wouldn't happen in a normal game, and I'm like, but it happened in this one, so it will happen in a normal game.
yeah, and that's like we struggled with that as well. Like I think it's a matter of like how they actually approach like the game, whether it's like you said with 17 being like a professional mindset to someone else who's like, I want to be the best, and that means X, Y, and Z for them, and they'll do that and they won't do anything outside of that. And really what it comes down to is making sure the team knows the compromises and why stuff is happening and kind of enforcing it. So putting incentives behind doing it, or de-incentivizing like not doing certain things, and doing that, because we definitely struggled from that, and had open conversations of like, hey, what you're doing in terms of this and your focus, like your focus during this block, but we need a little bit more out of you, because we need to leverage like your thoughts and everything on this, before you kind of check out, and kind of establishing what that means from the team and agreeing upon it and sticking to it is kind of one of those things. So we definitely struggled with that. I think the biggest one was just making sure that, hey, making sure you're good to go kind of before that. And that was, there was multiple aspects of that, of scheduling with kind of people in school at the same time, and getting there like 20 minutes before the actual match starts, to other aspects of kind of just like, hey, I do this as warm up, and it kind of works for me, but that it's not going to work for everybody else. But really kind of laying the hammer down at times and say, hey, we need you here at this time, and you're going to do this. This is, there's no kind of disagreeing with me on this. I just need you to do this. It's maybe less so for you, but more so for the team. So the individual versus good for the individual versus good for the team, and kind of balancing that.
For sure, definitely. So on NRG, what was like the thing that you liked best about coaching them, and what was the thing that you kind of disliked the most about coaching them?
Uh, it goes kind of hand in hand. So the thing I liked the most about it was probably the looting phase and the conversations that they would have. It was very not G-rated, we'll put it that way,
Right.
on some of the stuff. And Snark's such a goof. And he would bring up certain conversations, and it was a good time from that perspective when they were playing, and they did that, and it kept them loose. But at the same time, it was also like the crutch, and it was like the loss of focus, where sometimes when that was happening, it would start off like that, and then they just wouldn't be focused for the rest of the game, and it would kind of trickle into some of that, or the series. So like is more so on how everybody was individually set in terms of mindset, and how they approach the game to game individually, which had problems, and there was some stuff that worked and didn't work about that, of just keeping everybody loose and kind of a fun environment. But when it came down to the grindstone on like a tournament, you can't really have that as much, because fun, yeah, you gotta enjoy playing the game, but to a certain extent you have to get down to the numbers and the nitty gritty of it, and say, hey, this works, this doesn't work, we're going to be doing these things, and we're going to cut some of that out because we need to focus.
Right.
I very much like that about them. They were a very fun team. And whether it was like Jaime Music Bot in Discord, right in between lobbies, and they were playing like a farmer. Go ahead and look that up. It's a rap song. I would just go in there, and I would be at my actual job, and I would join Discord, and you hear the song, and they're like, Zach, leave. We're doing our warm up, and I'm like, what are you listening to? And they're just like, don't question it. And then I'd back out and just see what was queued on YouTube, and I was like, oh my god, this is what I like and kind of dislike about it. But it had a combination of those things where they had a really good time and really enjoyed their time together, and that high ride where like you're performing really well, and you're doing like the first in the week, and kind of destroying everything. That was what I enjoyed the most.
Yeah, for sure. So as someone that's coached a team that's been very successful like online and then gone to offline and then not been as
Yeah.
successful, what do you think like is the major difference between online and offline play? Because oftentimes people do bring up that people play different offline versus
Yeah.
online.
I think from strategy, a lot of people overthink it. So one of the things that I think is like
Thank you.
over
Holy shit.
is it is over prepping for a lot of stuff. And I'm like, guys, like, you do realize like we don't need to know the exact second everybody's going to be in this compound in this circle. That's too much for your brain to ingest right now. Like, we just need to focus on very simple things, and then number one, like, not being too uptight about it, which is very hard to do. I mean, you're in a higher pressure situation, so you know that feeling you get when it's like a 1v4 in like pubs or anything like that, but it's that multiplied by 1,000 all the time. Like, even when you're looting, there's pressure on you, which normally isn't the case when you're like an online league or something like that. So for some players, that's just so much, and they kind of like criticize themselves from that, or they take it like negatively, and it's just everything is 1,000 times heightened of what it is online. So like, for me personally, I flourish in that perspective. That keeps me focused. I'm more alert, and I kind of turn on like the fight or flight switch, and I'm very much the fight, and kind of go about it that way, where some people do struggle in that environment.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
and it's really hard for them, and we definitely saw both, and how individuals involved. Like, our first LAN was which one was that? We went to 3. So we had WSOE, we had Burbank, and then so our first one was Austin, and we played in the BYLC qualifiers, and everybody was shaky. Like, it was the first LAN with all 4 as a team, and the goal behind it was, hey, hopefully we get through the qualifiers, which were a goddamn nightmare.
That
I'll
was
let you know
the
that.
most awful tournament experience from everyone that I've heard. Because
Yeah.
obviously I just started coaching Secret at that time, so I was like up to date on everything that was going on at the venue. It sounded just
Oh yeah.
awful.
Yeah, I think it was in like 17 or 19 hours we played 3 games. So we played one series in like 19 hours as a result of power outages, internet outages, kind of delays on some stuff, and it was just like, can we just go home? Can you just auto qualify us or something? Like, do something
Yeah.
like that.
And like on top of the event being so poorly run, like the game at that point was not even in a good
No.
state. Like everyone is crashing constantly. In the actual event, I know that like 3 players of mine crash in different games.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous, man.
Yeah, it was so bad, from that perspective, where it's leaps and bounds where it is today. Like, even like playing pubs on the I didn't get to see the LAN client, because they only hosted it once for like the CIS region, and then at PGI Berlin, but it's promising. Like, they removed the anti-cheat and a whole bunch of other stuff that they can do, and the servers are run locally.
Right.
And everybody says it's like the best version of everything all the time, and it's absolutely insane. So we know that's there, and that's fantastic. But at that point in time, I started at the time where if you had 8 frames on second circle rotation, it was working out.
Right.
With like a 1080 back in third person days, where I'm like, oh, the car just teleported, and you're shooting at the middle of nowhere, because kind of the server side, it's probably further ahead, and you're compensating where the car is not actually visually at, but it's like there. Like, where that for me was there, and there's still a lot of work that actually needs to get done behind some of that stuff. But yeah, it's that was an interesting experience, like, overall, in terms of how it was run, and I still appreciate everything that the admins did, because a lot of it was out of their hands. It had to do with the actual Austin Convention Center's stupid power circuit breaker that like got tripped multiple times, and they had a faulty one, and Yeah, it was not fun, needless to say. But we still turned it into a good time at a certain point, and it kind of set us up for Burbank, and we didn't take advantage of Burbank, but yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I bet. Did you guys actually make it through the BYOC qualifier? I can't remember.
No, we missed one off the cutoff. So
Ah, okay.
going into the last game, we were in. So the reason we weren't learned something really fundamental on that is a lot of people play a lot safer on LAN. They don't take as many risks, and they're very more cut back. And we did that. We
Mm,
figured that out. The last game we were in qualifying position in fifth, and two teams. One team ahead of us was Optic, and then we had one team below us, which was Space Station. Um, Space Station got blessed that game. They had a very lucky game. The circle went to them completely in compound northwest of Pachinki. It's a priority with a flat top kind of on the hill,
yep, yep.
south of firing range. And it went to them every single time they won that game. And then Optic, who was right in front of us, who we probably would have passed, just fought their heart out and got third with a whole bunch of kills and fought everybody through the circle and played in dominating fashion. And we had an opportunity. We had 3 up kind of going into like 4th or 5th zone, and we decided to play passive as opposed to like play zone security and do some stuff a little bit better, and
Right.
decided to lay in the grass, and it bit us in the ass because that was one of the things we learned is we played way too passive. And you see it when you're looking at some of that stuff where a lot of teams are afraid to like commit into a particular situation because of how it could end up. And we could have easily maybe not have beaten Space Station, but gave Optic a run for their money
Right.
in order to pass them. And that was one of the things that was frustrating for us, because then we came back the next day to the convention center and had to watch everybody else play. Well, it was actually the same day, but we all went back to go to bed because we only had 2 hours of sleep. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we were there on that Sunday and kind of sitting there. We're like, God dang it. And it was a push for Burbank to do a lot better.
Yeah. I think that's something I always tell my teams too is that, if you're gonna play the game, you should play to win. You shouldn't just play to try to like
Yeah,
survive, right? And it's kind of like weird to say because you do play to survive, but if you're trying to win a series, you really do have to play to win at the same time. You have to know like
yeah,
when you need to be aggressive and when you really need to try to play to win and when
yeah,
it's like you need to give up, right? If you have 4 up, that's when you need to play to win. If you've got 2 up in circle 3, you try to survive, right? And that's the difference. A
yeah.
lot of people
I
still
mean,
play like they have 2 up when they got 4 in a good position in circle 3.
yeah, it's different. There's a lot of motioning in terms of your actual power you have as a squad. And a good way to break it down is drastic changes in gameplay, and in terms of how your team can actually play. So some of those are like, oh, you're losing vehicles. That changes a whole bunch. That's almost like losing a person. But
Yeah.
the
Probably worse
difference
actually.
depending upon where you're at and positions you're playing, it can be okay in phase of the game. But early
Yeah.
on, that's like, go run out there. You die, we'll save the 3 you as is. We'll have a lot more options that way. Like we'll take that and doing that. But there is a drastic shift in how you have to play. The difference between 4 people up to 3 people up isn't as big, but once you are 2 alive, that changes a lot.
Yeah.
Because PUBG, in terms of like a team fighting perspective, is very much a game of angles. And if you're 3 up, you can often get that initial pick for free if you're smart. And then it becomes a 3v3, so it's a very winnable fight. But when you're 2, you gotta have 2 people who trade and then go and take another 1v1 in some sort of fashion, or just kind of get really lucky. So that's a shift in terms of like your actual team members up. That is the most impactful, is when you get down to 2 players. With 4 and 3, you can still do a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like even nowadays in the grenade meta, like grenades are really the great equalizer in PUBG, right? Like if you even if you got two up, you got one up. I mean, you saw this with Wick and PGINA.
Yeah.
Grenades, if you just hit the right amount of grenades at the right time, like you can turn around a situation. So it's never really time to give up. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really comes down to where you're at. If it's a smart team, Wick's situation was kind of really good for him because he was able to kind of go to a spot of the zone. Like if you rewatch it, he's on that kind of like cube area. He has an amazing fight and he takes out, I think, Totality there. Um, yeah, it was Totality on that kind of ridge, and he's kind of cleared that from that perspective, and there's not too much he actually has to worry about. I think he had to like deal with Cloud9 off to the south on like the Wizard Tower, but then he knows he's kind of home free after that if he passed correctly. So it's more so about, okay, I know I'm in a good position or whatever, but getting yourself into a situation where you have a whole team who's not spread out because they had one building for cover and now they're using one smoke radius to kind of group up. That's a perfect situation for you if you got nades in your back.
oh, definitely.
But the biggest thing where nades come in is after that initial knock. So
Yeah, the finishes.
yeah, so it's more of like securing kill if you're in like a mid to short range battle where you're in someone's within nading radius, to either get a nade on someone going for the res, or for the finish, and kind of secure the points associated with that and kind of kill them.
Yeah, one thing I thought was kind of interesting watching PGI is I thought one way that you could really tell which teams were more experienced than other teams is when they would get a knock, they would pretty much always go for a grenade if there was even a little bit of danger to finish it, whereas a lot of the inexperienced teams would tend to just over peak for the knock and then get knocked
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things of if you look at team fighting and that there are a lot of teams who do it really well who as individuals they know if they're getting pressured on by like more than one person, like you see it and they're just soaking up attention and not really doing as much, which is completely fine if your other teammates are working for you, where you'll see it where they're kind of isolated on a tree or something like that with some support, and they know by just not getting knocked and staying up, they're applying more pressure than kind of peaking. Is one thing I'm more of a fan of instead of winning a 1v1 like outright, to outsmarting someone in a 1v1 and letting your teammates do the work. As long as your teammates are there to support you, and then also like if a teammate is in another situation, you're able to help them out. So that's kind of what is good about the good teams that you see happen is they can win their 1v1s, but they're often smarter to know when they shouldn't take the 1v1.
Right.
And that's what wins them the ultimate fight.
For a final topic, the one thing I actually was really interested in asking you was, I think going back to how we talked about how a lot of teams in NA don't think that coaches are very necessary. When we look
Mhm.
at the best team in the world, they don't really have like a dedicated strategic coach either. And I think that a lot of
Phase?
people, yeah, do they not?
Oh, they do.
Oh, they do? Why
Yeah.
don't I know them?
I talked to him a little bit in WSOE in Vegas,
Well,
when
never
we were
mind. I'm
there.
completely wrong then.
Yeah, no,
Because I've talked to some people in NA and they said that FaZe doesn't have one, and that's why that they didn't think it was necessary. So I was like, oh, I guess they don't
I don't
have
know
one.
if it's their manager or what, but one of the things with that team is they do a lot, and they have four very, very smart players who are also mechanically capable.
Right, yeah.
Where they may not want to involve someone from that perspective. They might just want to have someone just say, "Hey, can you take care of some of this stuff for us so we don't have to worry about it?" And we as a group will know how to do that. And that can work, if you're getting the results like they are, and still continuing as the game evolves to continue to get results. Now, if they're, for whatever reason at some point in time they don't, which I don't think is going to be anytime soon, if at
Yeah,
all,
okay.
is to look at potentially making those changes. But I feel like a lot of teams are cocky enough that they just don't see the need in it, and the benefit. Where if you do have the right person, they'll be able to hop in and actually think about those. But if you do have a smart team of four, you can make a lot of those decisions, and where where you can actually succeed and do that, and the coach would just be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right,
Let's
yeah.
do that.
Because
Where
what I was gonna say is like I feel like how with the way FaZe is, like it's really rare to have four players that are that talented both mechanically and strategically, where I feel like every single person on that team could probably IGL on any other team.
yeah, yeah, I know that's what everybody said about it, and I think earlier on in like hot drops and whatever, where it was if anybody listening is not familiar with it, is a whole bunch of the pros would queue and you get matched up with three other players playing with like I think I played with 3 out of 4 of them, and they all provided very good individual like calls to contribute to the team. They weren't like main IGLing, and obviously they have someone who makes like the final decision, but they all had very smart calls in terms of what to do, and that's kind of one thing to their actual success is they don't put all of the weight on one person's shoulders. They know they can point something out and know whether it's going to be good for the team or not, that's one of the reasons why they succeed.
Yeah, I feel like it's also kind of difficult from a coaching perspective when a team like that is the best team in the world, because it's very obvious why they're the best team in the world, right? They have four players that are like that, but if you're it's really difficult to get a team of four players that are all as strategically gifted and mechanically gifted as them. Usually you can only get someone that's like got
Uh,
all of one or all of another, I feel like. So it's
yeah,
kind of tough to try to like say that like if we want to be the best team in the world, we have to do this, but sometimes it's like you really can't do that with just like the people on the team, I feel like. And I feel like maybe even on some other teams that are at the top, they don't do that either. But
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of
You
always
can.
hard when you've got someone at the top that you feel like you should try to emulate, but when you like go for that style, it just doesn't work out as well, just because of the difference in styles of players that you have.
Yeah, and that's definitely like one thing that's that we definitely talked about, and it really comes down to coachability because a lot of the things that they're doing, yeah, it's a game sense kind of aspect, and you can work on those and improve on those where you have uh maybe like someone who's really mechanically gifted but has like a spark of that individual kind of like shot calling ability. I actually worked on it and had a drill for everybody of like, hey, everybody's gonna take a day of scrims and you're gonna IGL, and so, some of the team was like, can we not? I'm like, no, you have no choice in doing this. Um, to be able to spot like what is a good call and what is not a good call,
Hmm.
and just getting into that comfort zone of like we're gonna push it because eventually there's gonna be some opportunity that you see that not everybody else does, and if that you can call upon that and know whether that's going to work or not and tell the team to do that is just a skill that you can build on.
Right.
um
No, that's a really good
and
idea, actually.
yeah, I highly recommend it to anybody. It has to be done in such a way that you give that person the end shot calling of like, hey, everybody's trying to make plays, but I'm going to make the final decision on that. And kind of driving that, and that's one thing that people don't understand about the IGL in this game is what it should be is they shouldn't be the only one with ideas. Everybody should have ideas on something that might work and information around that, and the IGL is just like, okay, we're gonna do that one. And it's very similar to like a CEO of like a major company. They often aren't the ones of uh really kind of cultivating some of the stuff. They're kind of the one who take in the information and say, okay, let's do it or not. And that's kind of a what everybody thinks is completely different than that is whether it's a CEO or individual in-game leader is you have to be able to rely on your teammates to come up with ideas and information on that and be able to execute on it.
For sure.
So kind of pushing that, even not being like maybe the best caller or something like that, trying to work that aspect of your game is very important.
And I think perhaps my view might even be a little bit like skewed, just because the only tier one team I've worked with had one native English speaker and three native Spanish speakers, which made it quite a bit difficult, right? And they all
Yeah.
spoke English, but to varying degrees. Like for
Yeah.
example, Smitty on the team had probably the worst English, and we worked on it quite
Hmm.
a bit while he was there, and his communication improved tenfold while in the month that we worked together, right? Like it was really impressive how quickly he
Yeah.
improved. But Smitty is not someone that I would ever think would come up with many strategic options. But if I had to pick anyone to like 1v2 someone else, it would be him. Like that dude
Yeah.
can just nail headshots like no one else, and it's
Yeah.
nuts to
Exactly.
watch. But like if you had to ask him to like IGL, he probably would just not know what to do, right?
Yeah.
And he could probably learn, but I think he would rather just like work on his own mechanics and being the best shooter that he could be, right? And I think that that's like fine if he's got like a team around him to facilitate that, which is part of why we got 17 to be like main IGL and to really take on all
Yeah.
those responsibilities, so that Smitty and some of the other people could really just focus on not doing that. But
Yeah, I do see that aspect of it, but I also feel like you should be pushing those barriers of that and say, hey, like the best teams are doing this. Why am I not doing it? What is kind of keeping me from this? Where a lot of players fall into the perspective of like, oh, I'm not good at that, so I'm not going to work on it.
right,
Where you may not be good at it, but it could be something you can cultivate. So might as well try, and work on that aspect of it, so that way you can improve. Because I would say like one of the players like in that drill of IGLing who didn't do well was K-Mine. Like
hmm,
he freaked out and it did not go well. And by the end of it, he left and didn't want to deal with us for the rest of the day. And he's like, and then I synced with everybody the next day. He's like, yeah, I never want to do that again. But has since like improved his like individual calling abilities and like making calls for the team, and has gotten better off of that one thing. He's like, I get why you did it. I don't like it because I'm bad at it, but there's some merit to it. So let me work on some of that, and has since like you see it, in my perspective, one of the best like individual mechanical players, but has gotten smarter in that aspect of calls and where to kind of position himself with the team and kind of where to position the team in general.
yeah,
So I feel like you got to be able to press that comfort zone, and get uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable, just because it's gonna make you grow.
yeah. And I think that it's probably something that's going to become even more prevalent as PUBG continues,
Yep.
where everyone is going to need to be more cognizant of everything around them and not just be a shooter. I think before
Yeah.
it was more possible because everyone was on a lower strategic level to just rely on
Yeah.
one or two people on the team to make every decision. But I think, I mean, FaZe really showed, and I think Liquid to a similar degree showed
Yeah.
that you really do need four people that are smart on your team as well as good fraggers in
Yeah.
order to be the best. And I think that's just going to continue with every other team, where as teams, continue to shuffle around and get new players, teams are going to look more and more for people that are going to look for teams that have four smart players as opposed to just three
Yeah.
fraggers and one smart player.
Yeah, and that's I think we're at a kind of pivotal moment in the game, and I've kind of said this is the announcement of the pro league and the schedule of that is with that is going to draw new talent. You're going to have a whole bunch of new players who are just as good mechanically as you, and you need to be able to set yourself out, from that and take the experience that you had originally with the game, where you can have someone who's maybe like tier 2 CS:GO come in, which is farther than a lot of the player base in terms of aim and some of that stuff. And then they'll learn the game and they'll already be ahead of you. So you need to set yourself apart from by knowing the strategy and knowing why certain things work and why certain things don't, and being able to make those strategic calls to kind of set yourself apart from what's going to be a very large new incoming competitive scene as we see it kind of grow after PGI and kind of more positive reception towards PUBG as an esport, is really kind of the increase in talent, which is really good for the game, but it's also kind of a rocky situation for current players in it. Is really kind of that like, oh, job security is potentially at risk because now we have some really good shots coming into it, who could eventually feed into some of these teams. But The real differentiation between them is really going to be that strategy aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess to kind of start wrapping up, do you ever see yourself getting back into coaching in PUBG? Maybe when the Pro League starts up?
I might do some advising and stuff. I thought about a different position of kind of like working within an organization, and doing some very like business centric stuff. I have a good mind for that because that's kind of what I do for my day job is running and managing a team, and it sucked up too much time to where I felt bad because I couldn't give it everything I got. And if there is that time where I can focus like 20 plus hours a week or something on this, I would definitely do that. I think there's for me is kind of making sure that I transfer some of the stuff I've learned, whether it's like a podcast like this, or kind of like individual content off to kind of players either getting into it or current players in the scene who want to grow, and kind of focusing on that for a little bit. So working on some write-ups for stuff for teams I've advised, and kind of some overall plans that I had in the back of my mind for different things of how to actually approach the game, and work on those aspects of it. So that way the player base is the higher skill cap, so just increasing everybody's like potential in the game. Um, and focusing on that for now, and then if there is the opportunity and it's right and it makes sense for me and I can put everything I have into it, I would definitely be open to it. I love everybody I've met in the scene, whether it's at Vegas and going crazy and doing 3 days in a row of out until 3 or 4 in the morning and then up at 7:45, um, just to hang out with everybody because everybody's super awesome to hang out with, or to kind of sitting on the business side and working as a full-time job. That's one. It's one of my passions has always been kind of gaming, and if I can do that full time and kind of incorporate the living aspect into it, specifically with PUBG or any other game, I'd love to. So
Yeah, that's great, man. Anything that you want to like shout out, YouTube channel or Twitch stream, anything like that?
yeah, you can check me out on Twitch, the Zek underscore. Yeah, that's me on Twitch. Twitter's the same thing, so go check that out. Also, shout out, thank you to NRG for all the time we had there. Also, shout out to Team Gates, who I've really worked with, and Totality, and some other places I've advised. And shout out to you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been great talking to you. Nice to finally meet you and speak with you because I've been wanting to for a
Yeah.
while. I just never really got an excuse to do it.
Well, no excuse needed. You can always reach out.
Sounds good, man. All right. Well, thanks
Alrighty.
again. I'll talk to you later at some
Yep.
point.
Alrighty. Thank you.